Welcome to Bible Time. Today we're going to be looking at Leviticus chapter 21 and 22. But before we get to that, let me just talk to you here for a minute. You probably know that now we are in San Antonio and Bexar County under a stay-at-home order. And you might be wondering, well, how does that affect us as a church? And basically, it's not going to make any difference between what we're already doing. We'll still be able to live stream the service on Sunday, and we will do that at 9 o'clock. The fellowship groups will be meeting this week by means of digital fellowship using some technology so that everybody can connect up and communicate with each other. Next week, the women's life study will be starting back up using the same kind of technology. I know our student ministries, they've been functioning and connecting and fellowshipping and discipling through the means of technology as well. And our children's ministry is working hard to produce materials that'll be available to you to use with your children at home to continue the lessons that they're learning in Sunday school. So things are still happening. We're still working hard. And it's not the ideal situation. It's not what we would choose, but it's what we have, and we're able to make the most of it. And we're thankful for that. We're thankful for this means that we have right here to do Bible time together and to go through our daily Bible reading together. So I want to encourage you to be thankful for what we have. Cultivate an attitude of thankfulness. Don't be complaining. Don't be grumbling. You might not like what the government is doing. You might not agree with what the government's doing, but the bottom line is it doesn't really matter because we're called upon, like in Romans 13, to submit to the government. And submitting to them means more than just we're going to do what they tell us to do, but it also means we're going to show respect to them. We're going to speak respectfully about them. And I want to encourage you to be careful about that and to be thankful for what we do have. I want to encourage you to think like the Apostle Paul, who was unfairly treated, who was unfairly imprisoned, and yet he said in Philippians 1 that his circumstances have turned out for the advance of the gospel because he's able to proclaim the gospel to people who never would have heard him otherwise. And so he was thankful for that. That's the way we should be. And after all, there's no Christians being put in prison because of this. And there's no Christians in San Antonio being tortured because of this. And there's no Christians in San Antonio being told to not proclaim the gospel. And so we have a lot to be thankful for, and that's what we want to cultivate. And in fact, if you have a testimony of an opportunity that you've had under these circumstances, I'd like you to leave that in the comment section on this YouTube channel, the comment section that are underneath this video. Go ahead and tell us, share with us the opportunity that you've had because of these circumstances. And I'll give you a couple of illustrations. Based on our how many views we've had of our live stream of this last Sunday service, I can tell you that more people, in fact, probably many more people, heard this last Sunday's sermon than would have ever heard the normal sermon given under normal circumstances. I thank God for that. God is arranging things so that these kinds of things can happen, and we're glad for that. Also, just a little while ago, I was talking with our neighbor over the fence, observing proper social distancing, and they told me that they watched our service on Sunday. So I'm thankful for that, and the Lord is using this to advance His gospel and to make His name known, and that's what we want to be all about. So we're thankful for that, and we're thankful for the opportunity we have now to look at Leviticus chapters 21 and 22. And if you've read those chapters, you'll know it's all about the priests and all about the sacrifices. Very specific instruction is given regarding the priests, very specific instruction given regarding the sacrifices. And you might think, well, see, now I can't relate to that at all because in biblical churches, for example, we don't have a priest and we're not making animal sacrifices. But I want to encourage you to think about what's going on here and what the Lord is doing here. Think about these priests for a minute. They were in charge of the sanctuary of God, the tabernacle of God, the place where God met with His people. They were the teachers of the Word of God. They were the ones communicating God's truth to the people. They were the ones who were offering sacrifices on the altar of God to to honor the Lord and to confess sin and to give thanks to the Lord. They were the ones involved in doing all that. And they, at certain times in the history of the nation, they could come to the priests and they had means by which they could determine God's will for the nation at that time. And so they had a valuable, very valuable ministry to the people. In fact, apart from the priests, Israel had no way to approach God. This was God's way for them to approach him. This was the way that he communicated to them. Now, when you're looking at what it has to say here about the priests and the sacrifice, there's some words that you're going to notice being repeated. Words like blemish, words like defect, words like unclean. And what you come to see is that there was an incredibly high standard for the priest, incredibly high standard regarding his physical body, an incredibly high standard for his marriage and for his family. And in many ways, that standard is reflected in the New Testament with the standard that's set for elders, pastors, and overseers in the church, and even deacons in the church. They're to have exemplary lives, exemplary marriages, exemplary families in every way. There's a high standard there because they're representing God to his people. And that's the point that's being made there. And there's some verses that help us understand why this is so important to God. For example, in chapter 21 and verse 8, it says, "You shall sanctify him," speaking of the priest, "for he offers the bread of your God. He shall be holy to you, for I, the Lord, who sanctify you, am holy." Yeah, they're representing God, and they need to be able to do that. People need to look at them and see a reflection of God. And near the end of chapter 22, you see the same kind of a thing. It says, "So you shall keep my commandments and do them. I am the Lord. And you shall not profane my holy name, that I may be sanctified among the people of Israel. I am the Lord who sanctifies you, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord." And so we're to honor the Lord. We're to treat the Lord as holy. We're to be holy. We're to keep his commandments because by his grace, he delivered. He's telling the people of Israel, hey, remember, I graciously delivered you out of slavery to Egypt. I am your Lord. Honor me, treat me as holy, live holy, keep my commandments. And so it's a very serious responsibility that they have, but it's a wonderful responsibility that they have to represent God before the nations. I mean, all the nations knew what God had done in bringing them out of Egypt. And now they have an opportunity to exalt the name of God and to make him known among the nations. Now, what's the big idea of what's going on here? What's the whole idea behind this priest without a blemish and this sacrifice without a blemish? Well, it's painting a picture of that ultimate priest and that ultimate sacrifice that was going to be made. This priest in representing God, this sacrifice in being acceptable to God had to be without blemish. And that's paving the way, that's setting things up for the coming of Christ, who was both the priest and the sacrifice. And according to God's standards, he met it perfectly. He was the unblemished priest. He was the unblemished sacrifice. And you can think of a couple of verses that speak about that. Hebrews chapter 7, verse 26 says regarding Christ, "For it was indeed fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained," or unblemished, "separated from sinners and exalted above the heavens." You see, it's a holy God. You have to be an unblemished priest in order to stand before him and to represent him. Christ was that perfectly in every way, in a way that no man ever could have been. Christ was perfectly. And not only did you have to present an unblemished animal as a sacrifice, Christ being that sacrifice was that unblemished sacrifice, because it says in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 19, speaking of us being redeemed, we're redeemed with the precious blood of Christ, What kind of blood? Like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. Jesus Christ is the perfect priest. He's the perfect sacrifice. The people had to come to God through the priests and the sacrifices in their day, in Israel's day, which presented a picture of the ultimate priest and the ultimate sacrifice. That's how we come to God today. And so this is highly helpful for us in understanding the significance of Christ being a priest and Christ being a sacrifice and being the right kind of priest and sacrifice. Now that's something to be thankful for, because no matter what else is going to happen in today, no matter what new orders come down on us, no matter even if we were to catch the virus ourselves, we have a perfect priest who made a perfect sacrifice, which presents us as acceptable to God. Something to be thankful for, something to proclaim every opportunity that we get. Well, this has been a great day in our Bible time, and I'll see you tomorrow for more Bible time.